Hello, everyone. This is Gideon Fiddles. I'm managing editor of PR Week. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest installment of Brandstormers, presented by We. It's a series of podcasts where I'm talking to comms leaders, various sectors, but some of the leading minds in the industry. And I could not be more excited than to be joined by the guest who's joining me today. It's Liza Burnett Fefferman, EVP, Head of Communications at ViacomCBS MTV Entertainment Group. Liza, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Liza, of course, and I hope she doesn't get embarrassed when I read some accolades. She has been on PR Week's Power List. She is an inductee into our Hall of Femme, and she's judged the PR Week Awards many times. Just a really, really esteemed leader in the communications industry. So truly an honor for me. We're going to be talking today about purpose, and obviously that is one of the biggest words in the communications industry now, in the business world right now. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about Gen Z. We're going to be talking about films. We're going to be talking about some political issues, particularly the election and youth voting in the most recent election and in previous ones as well. We're going to be talking about her relationship with the president of her brand. Just a lot of really important things. So I'm looking forward to this very much, Liza. So without further ado, let's get to it. A little over a year ago, you were promoted to a role in which you gained comms oversight over a newly formed entertainment and youth group at Viacom. So much of the focus on purpose now stems from the fact that younger people, Gen Z, really care about what brands do on the purpose front. They make decisions on where they work. They make decisions on what they buy based on it. Really, really important. In fact, research has shown that 74% of respondents to a recent survey of theirs expect brands to take a stand on the issues that matter to them. In your role, you have to pay particular attention to what youth wants and demands. So what insights can you share about the Gen Z market and its focus on purpose with all of the decisions that they make?
Thank you so much, Gideon. And again, I just feel very privileged to be a part of this series, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you more. So I would say as the leading global youth brand, MTV has always had its finger on the pulse of young people for 4 decades. In fact, this year marks our 40th birthday on August 1st, which is truly hard to believe. Gen Z, or the Zoomers, are the new youth generation, and they are a force. As you noted, they really care, and rightfully so. Zoomers are empathetic. They believe in counsel culture, not cancel culture, and they see their mistakes as an opportunity for education. So from voting to consuming content, this generation just looks at life differently than millennials or Gen X. And I think it's most interesting to kind of focus on 4 big buckets. So there's obviously civic engagement, where you saw them mobilize the youth vote in 2021. I mean, we can really credit them for putting Joe Biden, ironically the oldest elected president, in the White House. Yeah. Mental health, they are a feeling generation that is more anxious than generations prior, but they're educating themselves and they're empowered to take action, adopting this maxim, be it, don't say it. So they don't believe in performative acts. They really believe in allyship, taking substantive action, and not just like posting on Instagram. And then I would say, moving to kind of racial justice, climate change, gun violence advocacy. They're a generation that hasn't experienced normal times, but rather, our world in decline. So from climate change to school shootings to systemic racism, they feel that they actually kind of burdened with having to solve the world's problems. And then finally, just authentically creating content. So as digital natives, right, they're defining themselves digitally, more authentically and more nuanced than generations prior. And they really don't need a story with a happy ending.
Wow, that's really, really good. First of all, I just want to note, as a perfect symbol of how busy Liza is and how honored I am she's joining us, I definitely heard some of the emails come in. Liza gets a lot of emails, so I'm really glad she's joining us today. No, Liza, you do not have to turn off your emails. I actually like hearing them. It's sort of symbolic of the year we live in. I'm waiting for kids to come into the video or my dogs to start barking. Hopefully they won't, but we'll see what happens. But I did mention that Liza was inducted into our Hall of Femme in 2022. And, in an interview that she did with us, which is on prweek.com, she said something when she was asked, when have you seen this industry or your organization really shine? I'm going to read what she said. I've seen our organizations shine through groundbreaking social impact campaigns when we amplify issues people care about, such as MTV going dark for 17 minutes to honor the students killed at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, and when CMT, Country Music Television, instituted equal radio play for female artists across all of its platforms, a monumental statement to the country music community. And finally, I am proud to be part of an organization that is starting a youth voting revolution in one of the most important elections of our time. How prescient you were when you said that. I want to use this as a springboard to discuss authenticity as it pertains to purpose initiatives brands enter into, as well as just decisions pertaining to matters brands might be better off not getting involved in. And if you don't mind, I'd like to throw in another piece of really interesting We and Quartz data, which showed that 84% of respondents believe customers will demand greater transparency and assurance that the brands they support have a positive impact on society, while 77% agree that brands have a moral obligation to engage with purpose on a societal issue when it impacts their business. So, Liza, after that long-winded introduction to the question, what is your perspective on transparency and authenticity as it pertains to the purpose initiatives brands enter into, as well as the decisions pertaining to matters brands might be better off not getting involved in?
I love this question. Thank you for asking it. So I think, taking a step back, at MTV, which is the cornerstone of MTV entertainment, our role really has always been to amplify the issues that young people care about and give them a platform. We've been doing it for 40 years. Our motto is really everything from escapism to activism and all the messiness in between. So our heritage and our legacy in mental health and DE&I, and as you just brought up, youth voting, we actually have a committed department and have since the get-go called Social Impact that is integral to everything we do. It's in our DNA. When MTV gets involved in any issue, we do so authentically and in alignment with our social impact mission. So it's really, we walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So if you take mental health, right? For more than 15 years, we've had a campaign entitled Half of Us, which has really played an incredibly critical role in reducing stigma and encouraging meaningful conversations about mental health and emotional well-being. In 2017 at the VMAs, Gideon, you may have been there, I can't remember, but Logic did an incredibly powerful performance that highlighted the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And in fact, just a few weeks ago, MTV Documentary Films, which I know we're going to touch on a little bit later, we produced a film called Each and Every Day, which really highlighted kind of mental health in young people, especially who are going through so much during the pandemic. We have this amazing ability and opportunity to weave mental health discussion into our storylines, to have it be a part of our content, whether that's Teen Mom or Black Ink Crew or Love and Hip Hop. It's something that we go all in on and not just checking a box. And I think that as you look at DE&I, we've long been recognized in the industry for diversity and equity and inclusion and representation. It's something we take great pride in and that is incredibly important to us. I mean, look back at The Real World, which was almost 30 years ago. It was the first reality series on television, and it helped shape a generation. And really sought to spotlight culturally resonant stories, HIV and AIDS, race, sexual orientation, mental health, addiction, like never before. You think back about how groundbreaking that show is. It was one of the first LGBTQ plus relationships documented on TV series. The first televised same-sex commitment ceremony. And, that unbelievable, it was such I still think about it and get the chills, unforgettable portrayal of Pedro Zamora's battle with HIV. So this is, again, in our DNA from day one. And I think as you look at where we are today and building on that legacy, we established, which, we take great pride in, a first-in-class DE&I, several first-in-class DE&I initiatives to really bolster a new generation of BIPOC and women creators, including a $250 million commitment to support and grow and incubate production companies that can then spin off on their own, that will be owned and operated by BIPOC BIPOC, and women. We've created this incredible culture code, which is a comprehensive DE&I orientation for our entire creative community, including our staff, our talent, and our production partners. And then I think, when you think about these amazing social justice organizations, we've partnered with the Museum of Tolerance, with Color of Change, with GLAAD, with the ADL, among others. And our goal is to construct a communal set of values, understanding, and baseline cultural norms to create the most inclusive and welcoming creative community possible. One thing I would just add is, we do internal town halls that Chris McCarthy, our president, leads, called Courageous Conversations, where we have very frank, open dialogue on anti-Asian bias, on racial justice, on the rise of anti-Semitism. So I think all of these things build on the legacy that MTV has established for so many years, and we'll just continue to do so.
I really appreciate that, Liza. I'd almost forgotten how ahead of the curve MTV has always been on so many of these issues, and just makes me really even happier that I asked you to speak with me today, because it's truly, in terms of companies and who are authentically purposeful, it's pretty inspirational. And speaking of inspirational, we touched on it before, the role of the youth vote in our most recent election, as well as ones that preceded it. Now, I would imagine, I'm going to get a little nostalgic here, but I'm thinking most of the people out there probably remember in the early 1990s when Rock the Vote, a signature platform, not only for MTV, but for any brand in terms of getting involved in key societal issues, first became part of the public conversation. Throwing in another bit of data from We here, which is also really excellent. Recent research from We and We Communications and Quartz showed 65% of respondents think that current social and political trends are pushing leaders to define their purpose and demanding that organizations take a stand, while 64% believe that brands, rather than government, are primarily responsible for driving positive societal change. Now, on the heels of an historic election, one in which so many young people voted, I'd love to chat with you a bit about your company's continuing efforts to keep young citizens invested in the political process, and what role do you feel any brand, or most brands, should take in engaging youth, particularly on key political and societal issues?
Well, thank you so much for asking me this question, and I think that you really set it up beautifully. I mean, I think MTV's legacy in youth in the youth vote is obviously well documented, and I think our 2020 campaign was a natural evolution of Rock the Vote and Choose or Lose. Those campaigns were specifically about voter turnout, and in 2020, it was about voter access. So what we did is that we helped connect young people's issues with their power to vote. So millions of first-time voters, as you know, had already been marching for Black Lives Matter, the Climate Change March, March for Our Lives, but they had never been told or given the tools on how to register to vote. And so we sought to bridge that divide, and we leveraged our history in civic engagement to become a convener of brands with one singular focus of increasing voter access. We built these incredible coalitions of like-minded businesses and organizations to amplify this nonpartisan message to their constituent groups that ultimately grew into a national movement around early voting. And actually, Gideon, what kind of still blows me away is that we led the charge to establish Vote Early Day. And it's a new national holiday in October to encourage companies to educate their constituents, their audiences on early voting options. And it's a simple idea that just grew into a monster success. So when we launched this in March, we had 60 partners. By October, on Vote Early Day, we had 3,000. Some of whom, I'll just give you a handful of examples: Facebook, Uber, the NHL, NBA, Target, Salesforce, Home Depot, and many, many more, to help, again, all with the singular focus of making voting quicker, easier, and safer for all. And then the results, which, I'm so thrilled to be able to share, really were just staggering. A record more than 3 million people cast their ballots creating a movement that then resulted in more than 100 million people voting early in the November election. So our campaign really was transformational because it tapped into this zeitgeist of the nation during a historic election, increasing the power of young voters and fueling this early voting movement that really we're hoping will change how future elections are run. And the thing about MTV, we don't just stop where one would assume we would. So we didn't just stop at election day. We went to Georgia, and along with Delta and Home Depot and Coca-Cola, all of which are Atlanta based, we were actually one of the leading companies working in the state. And we gave grants to grassroots organizations focused on registering first-time voters. And Trevor Noah and The Daily Show, which is part of our portfolio under Comedy Central, drove his young viewers to both volunteer and register to vote in Georgia. And as we all now know, young people in Georgia returned the power to Democrats in the Senate. So I don't mean to be long-winded, but I'm just proud of our efforts, and they were so comprehensive and they were so thoughtful. And I think, we have the results to back it up.
The pride that you show is absolutely justified, and it's actually refreshing to see because, again, the whole point here of this conversation, all the conversations happening in the industry, is just how important purpose is to a brand. And not even, obviously, from a bottom line standpoint, it's obviously very important, but it's just important for just the reputation of the brand and just how people look at brands. And I know personally, in the 80s were when I grew up, so MTV was really a part of my childhood, but it really, really was. I really do understand, and perhaps I appreciate it more now than I ever did before, just how much MTV really, really impacts society beyond what you see on the screen and beyond what you see in, podcasts or whatever other platform you might look at. So it's really, really inspiring, Liza. Thank you for that. And, I want to make a quick transition over here to, you co-lead MTV Documentary Films. I don't know when you have time to do that, but you somehow managed to. Now, I do want to talk specifically about a couple of films you recently produced, 76 Days and Hunger Ward, which are actually both shortlisted for Oscars. And the reason they're important to this conversation is part of the reason why they were made. There's a definite societal impact angle here. So I want to give you a couple of minutes to talk about that.
Thanks, Gideon. I'm so proud of our fledgling MTV Documentary Films, which I, as you pointed out, co-lead in conjunction with Nina L. Diaz, who is our Chief Content Officer, who's just a rock star, and of course the incomparable Sheila Nevins, whom we brought in from HBO Documentary Films. Mm-hmm. 76 Days was a film we saw at the Toronto Film Festival, and it is an extraordinary look at the first 76 days when China locked down Wuhan. And it is set deep inside the front lines of the crisis in 4 hospitals in Wuhan, and tells the most indelible human stories of the healthcare workers and the patients who struggled to survive the pandemic with resiliency and dignity. It's an incredibly powerful film directed by Hao Wu, and we're really proud to be behind it. And Hunger Ward, thank you for also mentioning, was filmed from inside 2 of the most active therapeutic feeding centers in Yemen. And the film chronicles the healthcare workers fighting to save the lives of extremely malnourished children, with a backdrop of a population on the brink of famine in a forgotten war. And we just feel incredibly proud that we get to stand behind these films and bring them to audiences. So, thank you for touching on that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And something else that I obviously have to touch on is we are recording this interview just before, and it will probably be seen just after, another major project that you're working on. Again, Liza, I do think you sleep, but sometimes I wonder.
I don't.
Well, I don't necessarily know.
Is any of us? Not one of us.
Well, I don't know if I want to promote no sleep, but I get your point. But the truth, no, seriously, one of the things I know you've been working on tirelessly as of late is Paramount Plus, and I would be remiss if I didn't let you talk at least a minute about that exciting launch and some of your efforts related to that.
Yes, it's been all hands on deck across ViacomCBS to launch our rebranded streaming service, Paramount Plus, which we couldn't be more excited about. We rolled out some of the exciting content that's coming to the service last week on our ViacomCBS Investor Day, and the response has been so great. So from our MTV Entertainment Group, people can look forward to seeing The Real World, the first season, reunited in the same loft with the same cast. I know that I can't wait for it, and all my friends and high school friends, and I've heard from people I haven't heard from in some time who are literally chomping at the bit for this Real World reunion. We're going to be bringing Behind the Music back, Yo MTV Raps, a Yellowstone prequel, a Yellowstone spinoff. Younger, which is such a popular show from Darren Star, is coming to the service for its last season. So much exciting content. And this was just an example, I think, of our company truly at our best, locking arms, aligned on a message, and really, getting to experience and work on the next evolution of our business.
Very, very exciting. Is Beavis and Butthead going to be coming back?
Yes. Oh my God, Beavis and Butthead. I'm sorry, I forgot to say, we're doing a Beavis and Butthead movie for Paramount Plus, and we also have Beavis and Butthead, a series for Comedy Central. So, lucky you.
I never watched that show. My fingers are behind my back crossed. Okay, so yes, I did watch that show.
Oh, I loved Beavis and Butthead.
Oh my God! Well,
genius.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Speaking of geniuses, actually, the final topic I want to broach with you is something that I know will be very, very relevant to everyone listening to this and watching this. You have a particularly strong relationship with Chris McCarthy, who's the president of your brand. And that CCO-CEO relationship is so important. So I'd like to give you a minute at least to talk about that relationship and how it's evolved over the years, and why it's so important to him and why it's so important to you.
Well, I can only speak to why it's so important
I know.
me, and I hope he feels the same way.
I'm sure he does.
When I interviewed with Chris back in March of 2016, I'll never forget, it was the day after both of my kids were up all night with stomach viruses, so I hadn't slept a wink. And we had breakfast, Gideon, at a place you and I have been to so many times, yes. Near the office, and we just hit it off immediately. He has great humility coupled with an incredible drive, and on top of that, he's just a real mensch. So I consider myself very ambitious and determined. Some people have used the adjective dogged, which I take as a compliment. I certainly met my match in Chris McCarthy. I think, we're cut from the same cloth and have a lot of the same traits. This underdog mentality, leave no stone unturned, never take no for an answer, never take anything for granted, surround yourself with great people, and always lead by example. And we work incredibly closely. We talk everything through. And I feel I've learned so much from him and feel grateful to have a boss with such a strong business acumen, coupled with fostering an environment where everyone feels heard. And I can't say enough good things about him and truly about our relationship. So I consider myself very lucky.
Well, I'm sure if Chris were here, he would echo those statements. And I know that from conversations you and I have had, his appreciation for the comms function is through the roof. And clearly that's important. But that open relationship between, the great relationship between you and him is obviously something that all CCOs would aspire to. And I'm happy to say I think a lot of CCOs have a great relationship with their CEOs and presidents as well. So that's kind of exciting too. But
I just would say that that's such a good point. I mean, I think that Chris really understands the value of what we bring and why it's such an important function. Mm-hmm. And I think, as in my role, I so appreciate the value he puts on comms and how much respect he has for the function.
Oh, that's terrific. And, Liza, obviously, as this conversation has gone on, obviously, I think people will realize you and I, obviously, this is not the first time you and I have ever spoken before. I've known Liza for a few years now. And look, her induction into the Hall of Fame and her space on the Power List and all those things don't necessarily happen by accident. She's very humble, I'll say that, but she's also truly one of the leading communicators in the industry. And more specifically to our conversation today, actually, this is quite inspiring to me because I knew MTV and ViacomCBS are brands that are steeped in purpose. But it's interesting that we go back on 40 years of MTV in particular, and we really could see through what we see on the screen and through other things that are not on the screen, just how committed MTV is to this. So Liza, I really, really want to thank you for taking the time. And again, obviously, we're recording this a couple of days before Paramount Plus launches. Everyone heard all the emails coming in. You're a very busy woman, so I really appreciate you taking the time today. Obviously, I also want to thank We for sponsoring this. Be on the lookout for future Brandstormer podcasts because we're going to be interviewing a lot of other really, really tremendous leaders in the communications industry. But on behalf of We and on PR Week and Liza, of course, it's Gideon Fiddleside. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you all really, really soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much.